Good evening. Welcome to City Council meeting for October 12th, 2021. We continue to be under guidelines for anyone in attendance in this room to properly wear a face mask, whether they've received vaccinations or not. As always, I encourage everyone to obtain accurate information on the readily available vaccines that have proven to be safe and effective so we can resume normal activities. Items listed on the agenda may be taken out of order. 2 or more agenda items for consideration may be combined, and any item on the agenda may be removed or related discussion may be delayed at any time. With that, I will call the meeting to order. All members of council are present. The agenda has been properly posted, and we will begin with Pastor Deborah Downs from Christian Center with our invocation, please. Please rise.
Please join with me in prayer. God of creation, Lord of the harvest, life-giving Spirit, we praise you. The coolness of autumn reminds us that the harshness of this world's elements and circumstances are fleeting, and the newness and bounty of your mercy prevails. Seasons come and go, and as they change, we are reminded that you, O God, never change. Your love is everlasting and unfailing. As the earth prepares for winter's rest, I pray that we too would prepare our hearts for entering into your rest. To enter your rest is to lay our worries and anxieties at your feet, to trust that you are Lord over all, to love both your leadership and discipline, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. Tonight, we offer up a special praise to you for the life of Gary Berger. Holy Spirit, we pray for your comforting presence to family and friends during the season of grief and loss. His life reminds us that our actions and commitments are not without effect, and perseverance paves the road to legacy. His sharp wit and quick humor kept our hearts light. His passion for God and family kept our hearts deep. His commitment to our safety and protection kept our hearts guarded. Raise up new leaders and role models to carry on that legacy, that we may live and love freely in the shelter of your provision. We submit our petitions and decisions this evening to you. We ask for your divine wisdom, discernment, and understanding in the matters of stewardship before us. May we faithfully govern and protect all the resources you have placed under our care. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. We will now have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pastor Downs, thank you, and thank you for remembering Mr. Berger. Madam City Clerk, were there any public announcements?
No announcements.
Thank you. We will begin with our initial public comment period. Comment during this period must be for items listed for action on the agenda. Each speaker will have up to 5 minutes. We will also be providing a phone-in for anyone who's watching the live stream, and comments may have been submitted prior to the meeting via email. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to speak in public comment? All right, we will go to the call-in. Anyone wishing to call in, the phone number is 702-589-9629. Again, this is our initial public comment period. Phone number for anyone wishing to speak in the initial public comment period is 702-589-9629. Hearing no one for public comment, Madam City Clerk, were there any email comments submitted?
Yes, I have one.
Please go ahead.
It was submitted by Matthew D. Teresa. Members of council, on the agenda for the council meeting of 10/12/21 is item number 9. It concerns the inclusion of 115 acres to the south and west of the I-11 US 95 interchange into the energy zone. Once that is accomplished, the city can then begin lease negotiations with Schuyler Townsite LLC in order to include that parcel into their adjacent solar footprint in the El Dorado Valley. The proximity of this land to the I-11 US 95 interchange makes this a somewhat controversial and important issue. The Planning Commission, of which I am a member, recently voted 5-2 against proceeding with an appraisal, the first step in designating this parcel a part of our energy zone. One commissioner commented that he was done with solar. Another openly stated that leasing that land would interfere with future commercial development in the El Dorado Valley. I voted in favor of proceeding in the minority for just that reason. It was not long ago that our mayor and the majority of our city council were voted out largely, I believe, on the voters' outrage over the proposed Hoover Dam Gateway Center and now the infamous pipeline to nowhere. Voting to include this land into our energy zone and proceeding with lease negotiations would support the wishes of the vast majority of Boulder City. Voting against it would indicate a desire on the part of the council members to support commercial development in the El Dorado Valley. Therefore, I implore you to vote in affirmative on agenda item number 9. Doing so would demonstrate that Boulder City is a forward-looking town that supports renewable energy over a resource-consuming development at a time when the availability of such resources are declining in the western U.S. Thank you for your time, Matt D. Teresa.
Thank you. All right, hearing no others for public comment, we'll close the initial public comment period. Move to approval of the regular agenda. Any changes, Madam City Clerk?
No changes.
And we have Michael O. as our substitute city attorney this evening. Any changes?
No changes.
Thank you. And Mr. City Manager?
No changes.
Thank you. Council, any changes for the regular agenda?
No changes. No changes.
Anyone wishing to move for approval?
I move to approve the regular agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, we'll move to the consent agenda. Madam City Clerk, any changes?
No changes.
Mr. City Attorney
No changes.
and Mr. City Manager.
I have no changes.
Anyone on council wishing to offer changes on the consent agenda?
No changes.
Do we have a motion?
I move to accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, that brings us to item number 9 then, introduction of bill number 1908. Mr. City Manager?
Yes, Mr. Michael Mays will be handling this item, our Community Development Director. And we also have representatives from Schuyler Townsite LLC, Rick Lammers and Linda Bolin in the audience if you have any questions of them.
Thank you.
As a bill introduction, there would be no discussion this evening, just action by the council
Thank you.
to introduce the bill.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to make a motion for introduction of bill number 1908?
I move to introduce Bill number 1908 and waive the reading except for title.
Bill number 1908, an ordinance of the City of Boulder City, Nevada, to amend the zoning map to rezone approximately 115 acres west of US 95 within the Boulder City town site from S Study to ER Energy Resource, AM-21-354. Bill number 1908 will be considered at the October 26, 2021 regular City Council meeting.
Thank you. Move to item number 10, presentation regarding Community Development Department's annual report to City Council. Mr. City Manager.
This will be Michael Mays again, our Community Development Director, going over the past year of his department's efforts.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. The Community Development Department has 5 areas of responsibility. They include building permit and inspections, planning and zoning, economic development, code enforcement, and historic preservation. These are the areas that the department serves the community in. I'd like to highlight briefly each of the activities within these 5 areas for you this evening. Starting with building permits and inspections. We have several action items that are underway, and I wanted to first highlight the fact that for the first time in 5 years, the city has a full-time building official, Nathan Ball, and already is working with our staff to look for ways to improve the building permit process. A couple of things that have been implemented recently is the development of checklists to help applicants understand what's needed to apply for a building permit. Once they go through that checklist, we review it to make sure it's complete, and it's a great way to make the process more efficient. So the applicant knows what they need, and then they can submit that accordingly. We have also, over the past year, due to COVID, require electronic submission of building permits. Paper can still be provided, but it's more efficient to process electronically. And so we've been working with that system. The staff that is involved in building permits now have a daily huddle. They talk about the status of where building permits are at, what issues there are, what they need to respond to customer inquiries. It's been a great way to help make that process more efficient. And we're also looking at how well we are doing compared to the jurisdictions in the valley. And we'll continue to report that out to the council so you have an understanding of how quickly we're responding to the submissions of building permits and processing those through the department. This is a chart that you've seen in prior years, but I think it's good to highlight the number of building permits that are issued each year. With the exception of 2018, which was an anomaly due to the reporting of permits for Gingerwood, you can see that we consistently each year are processing at least 500 building permits. And that can be anything from a simple water heater to the construction of a new home. One of the department's benchmarks, performance measures that we look at, record, and report on is tracking how long it takes to review the first submittal of a building permit. You can see with this chart that we are comparing the 4 quarters of each fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21. You'll see that in the second quarter of each of those fiscal years, we did see a significant increase in the review time, 20 days. That was the average for a building permit at that time. This is due in part to staffing issues that the department had. But with now the hiring of the full-time building official and us being back up to full staff, we're going to continue to work on reducing that review time. You can see in the fourth quarter comparison between fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21 that we actually made a average review time reduction in fiscal year 21. And so we'll continue to work on improving that timeline. With planning and zoning responsibilities, these include obviously management of the growth control ordinance, processing zoning and subdivision applications, community development block grant administration. And a couple areas that we're going to be focusing on over the next year are updates to the city's zoning ordinance, areas that are outdated or need clarification. And that includes efforts to respond to the current climate conditions and water shortages in southern Nevada, and looking at our landscaping ordinance and the required plans that are necessary for new development. In fact, currently in the month of October, we have been reaching out to citizens, asking for them to provide feedback on proposed changes to the landscaping ordinance. And eventually we will bring that feedback as well as proposed changes to the council, planning commission, and as it relates to the historic district, the historic preservation committee. One of the 2025 strategic plan goals is for our department to report out annually to the city council our compliance with the city's growth control ordinance. As you can see from this chart, this shows each construction year, which begins on July 1 of every year, and then for that entire year, how many allotments were issued by the city in each of those construction years. You can see with what I'll call a lime green, bright green color, that indicates the maximum number of allotments that are allowed per our growth control ordinance, 120 per year. So with the actual number being allocated, it's roughly a fourth of the total maximum each construction year. So we are in full compliance with our growth control ordinance. Moving on to economic development. Our economic development coordinator, Rafi Fasekjan, played a key role in helping local businesses during the pandemic. He helped to administer the CARES grants that were approved by the city council. 56 grants were approved for a total of $300,000 that was provided to our small businesses in our community to help with their needs during the pandemic. The Economic Development Coordinator also works on administration of the RDA. This is the program that encourages reinvestment within our community in the RDA district to help improve the overall tax base, and we use those tax dollars collected from that district to incentivize reinvestment. He also helped 323 businesses during fiscal year 21. This was a 54% increase over the prior fiscal year, but understandable considering the needs during the pandemic. This is also another performance measure for our department to track how many businesses we're helping each fiscal year. One of his other responsibilities is making sure that we're complying with the city's economic development plan. We're now 2 years into a 4-year plan that has several action items. They are broken into 3 pillars. You can see on this chart, those 3 pillars are business retention, tourism, and economic sustainability. With the first pillar, we have accomplished 78% of those action items. and we're still working on the action items with the other 2 pillars. But of the total 20 action items within the plan, 9 are complete. And so we will continue to work over the next 2 years to implement those action items that were adopted as part of the Economic Development Plan. We continue to try to encourage businesses to look at RDA grants, again, as I mentioned before, to encourage reinvestment within the community. And as you can see from this chart, over the last 3 years, the number of dollars dispersed to local businesses has continued to increase, showing that reinvestment within the community. One measure of how we look at the status of the local economy is we look at the office and retail vacancy rate. The department knew with the opening of I-11 that this was going to be an important data point to track to see about the impacts of the opening of I-11. As you can see with the chart on the screen, this shows the vacancy rate of office and retail space within the community for the second quarter of each year, each fiscal year. And so with the dark blue, as you can see on the screen, that was the second quarter right before the opening of I-11. You'll see that the vacancy rate, both with Boulder City as well as the Las Vegas Valley, was higher, but we've seen a reduction in the vacancy rate with both Boulder City and the Las Vegas Valley since then, and has remained consistent. So that's good news despite the challenges of the pandemic, that office space, retail space is being reoccupied and utilized within the community. Code enforcement, I wanted to highlight a couple of areas here. Another one of our performance measures that we track is the percentage of cases that are opened and closed within that same fiscal year. And so as you can see from the pie charts on the screen, for fiscal year 20, 82% of the cases that were open were closed and resolved. In fiscal year 21, that was increased to 95%. We're always striving to respond to our citizens' concerns about property maintenance. And Patrick Richardson, who is our code enforcement officer, he splits his time. Half of his time is focused on code enforcement responsibilities, and the other half is coordination of our police volunteers. And so we've seen through the implementation of See, Click, Fix, citizens responding and providing their concerns about property maintenance, and it's an efficient way for our code enforcement officer to be able to respond to those concerns. Moving on to historic preservation. There are several areas of historic preservation I wanted to highlight this evening, both things that have been accomplished and things that are underway. As you know, with the adoption of the Boulder City Historic Preservation Plan, similar to the Economic Development Plan, similar to the Strategic Plan, we now have a roadmap on the priorities of how to move forward with historic preservation efforts within the community. We're working with the Historic Preservation Committee to align their goals with the Historic Preservation Plan, and that will be coming back to them this month. The council approved with fiscal year 22 monies to provide for a historic preservation consultant. And the city has undertaken an RFP process, and staff is recommending moving forward with Northwind Consulting for that work. This is going to be important, having a consultant on board that can help with the city's historic preservation objectives, and we'll be bringing that contract before you on November 9th. The Ad Hoc Historic Preservation Ordinance Committee was created last year and has had several meetings looking at proposed changes to the city's Historic Preservation Ordinance. At this point, after the public input, we're waiting on feedback from SHPO, who is reviewing the draft ordinance that was created by the committee. And once we have that feedback, we'll reconvene the ad hoc committee to seek direction on how we proceed with that proposed ordinance. Ultimately, they will provide their recommendation back to you, the council, on how to move forward. The Historic Preservation Grant, this is the residential grant, also approved by the City Council for fiscal year 22, $100,000 to help our residents with remodeling their homes, to do so in such a way that preserves the historical integrity of those homes. We're going to be bringing to the Historic Preservation Committee this month a draft guideline for that grant program. With their recommendations, we'll bring that to the City Council for your review and approval so that we can move that grant program forward and again help to encourage historic preservation efforts within the residential areas of our historic district. Also pleased to report to you this evening that SHPO has granted $3,000 to the city for training opportunities through the National Alliance for Preservation Commission's camp that would occur later on within this fiscal year. And we will be moving forward with another council directive regarding the historic water filtration plant. The Commission for Cultural Centers and Historic Preservation, CCCHP, grant application is due in February, and so we're going to undertake the approved study that the council approved with this fiscal year within the next couple of months so that we can be prepared to submit a grant application for the restoration of the historic water filtration plant. And with that, I can take council questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mays. Questions or comments from council? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for the report, Mr. Mays. I thought it was really informative. In fact, you answered some of the questions already that I had come with, but I did have a couple others. Just with regards to the number of cases closed on the code enforcement. How is it that we determine? I mean, were the number of cases about the same that we had the 2 years, and we are seeing an actual increase in efficiency, or I'm just kind of curious about how those numbers kind of leveled out. And
yeah, I don't have the exact numbers of the number of cases for each year, but certainly part of it is trying to respond to the customer inquiries and resolving issues. What our code enforcement officer tries to achieve is a voluntary response from property owners to address the issue.
Okay. Yeah, I just, the only thing that just runs through my head with how different, especially this last year and even the previous year has been, it can kind of throw some things a little bit wonky. The only other question I really had was regarding the landscaping ordinance. You're outreaching to for citizen input, and then we'll hopefully move further along before it comes to the council. Is there a rough time frame? Obviously when we're talking about landscaping, there are times in which it is best to move forward. Say fall, spring, things like that. If we're actually talking about landscaping, do you think that that's something that will be coming before us prior to say next spring when planting and things like that are things that we should be considering, or is it really too early in the process right now to know when that might come before us?
Our goal would be to bring this forward as a text amendment for council consideration before the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bridges?
Yeah, a couple things. Let me get back to there. First of all, I want to thank you for the presentation. And one of the things I wanted to comment on is, along with other departments, I really appreciate the fact that you're referring back to the goals of our strategic plan, that the actions taken by your department refer back to them, and the successes are based on those goals. I think that's really important because it helps me to make sure that we're going in the right direction. And do you get any complaints? I mean, in terms, occasionally I'll hear somebody say, you know, this took a long time because I couldn't get the permit or I couldn't get the license. And how are those addressed? Is there, are they addressed immediately? Somebody calls and says, you know, I've been waiting. Does that seem to be getting better? I see the numbers, but I'm just curious on an individual level. Whether those situations have more to do and whether the person's gotten things in on time, which I understand can happen, or just any glitches in the system.
Well, I think, let me first say that we're always looking for opportunities to improve the process. Regardless of what we've implemented over the last couple of years, some of the strategies to help improve our responsiveness to our customers, we're looking for additional ways to improve that. So I'm always open to additional feedback, certainly feedback that the council receives from constituents. I'm happy to look into issues. Going back to my comment about the daily huddle, that now is an opportunity for our staff as they hear from customers and issues that are coming up to quickly try to address those issues. And so that is a good way to be responsive to our customers. But there's always opportunities to improve.
Wonderful. And I wanted to say how important to me, and I'm sure to all of us, the issue of climate and water is in a lot of our ongoing decision-making processes. Landscaping, everything, because those are the things we're going to be addressing head-on in the near future. And one more, I want to compliment Rafi on his work with the business community. It just seems like the distribution of the grant funds and taking care of the administration of the plan, of the economic development plan, has gone relatively smoothly, and I do want to compliment him on that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Jorgen?
Hi, thank you so much for this information. I wanted to go into the building permits just a little because having freshly been put in, I was just out there listening to some of the concerns, and it's nice to see how much we've done as far as lessening the amount of time. I was just wondering, I know that Henderson or different places have software where it puts the whole process online, and it allows all the moving parts, all the people, say if the fire chief or someone needs to go in and check, that they know who's next in line. Is that something that's possible for us?
Yes, Nathan Ball, our new building official, is looking into that opportunity. What's going to be critical is that whatever software our department is using communicates and coordinates with the other existing softwares in place. And so that will be a part of the assessment process. But if we can come up with a cost-effective, viable option, we would certainly present that as part of a budget consideration.
Okay, yeah, because I think that would be kind of a nice direction to be going in. And then there's transparency even with that all moving parts are visible to everyone, including the person who has the permit in, and they can see where it is in the process. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the landscaping ordinance, and I know that we're looking for community input. I was impressed with Tedder Talk, which had that information in it and how to access filling out a survey or how to be able to do that. I was wondering if there were any other ways that we were getting that information out so that people could have input in this process.
Yes, Lisa LaPlante, our communications manager, has been looking at different ways to get the word out regarding the public input during October, and we'll continue to promote that so we can get a good response to it.
I know in the past you guys have put it in the utility bills. I don't know if that's a place where people look at their water bill and go, "Oy," and then they want to input maybe.
You will see it in your October utility bill.
Fantastic. That's a little nudge. Also impressed with 323 businesses helped during this fiscal year. A healthy business community is a healthy community, really. Businesses give back to the community gives to businesses, and the city thrives when that happens. So I like what I'm seeing there. And I think that that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Mays, again, thank you for the presentation. You know, having a full-time building official, I recall when, you know, we didn't have one. I think that has been beneficial. I've certainly heard certain concerns, as Councilmember Jorgensen had commented, of people not getting things done as quickly as they would like to. I think that may help. I know in the past we have talked about some online application tools, and I believe at that time we found that the cost of those software packages was too much based on the number of permits. I think we're somewhere around, what, 350 permits a year. It just wasn't penciling out well for us. But perhaps Mr. Ball can find another solution. I know I've seen presentations on a system that North Las Vegas uses where they can apply for it, they can take a picture of the finished project, and all of it is done online and saves the homeowner quite a bit of time. The landscape ordinance, absolutely, we are scheduled for a Tier 1 water emergency next year. We know what Lake Mead looks like with its constantly falling levels. Yeah, we need something on that front. I also want to say thank you to you and your staff. The Community Development Block Grant use over the past couple of years, I think, has been the most effective use of that money that I've seen occur. I think it's really going to organizations and projects here in the community, which is what that money is designed to do. So again, thank you for your insights and your work on getting that done. With the CARES Act money, you know, that was something that I had put forward, I believe, 3 times to increase the amount of that grant money available for both businesses and residents. You know, having talked with some of the business owners, between that money, the PPP loans, I'm sure that our vacancy rate would be higher without that work. I know there was one person one business in particular that I had spoken with, went in to speak to the business owner and explained the program briefly to her, and she said, "Oh yes, Rafi Fistection was here yesterday." So again, my hat's off to Mr. Fistection for all of his work on that. With regard to historic preservation, I think that we are now in a place, and again, I appreciate the work that you and your staff has done. The study that was done by the Preservation Foundation for Nevada, the Northwind update to our nomination to the National Register, I think has put us in a position where we're actually able to do something rather than the simple lip service that's constantly given to preservation efforts here in Boulder City. I see a plan developing. We'll see if that plan moves forward or if it gets stopped as it has in the past. But I do think there's a real foundation for moving forward with that. The RDA grant program, you know, clearly it did not accomplish what my vision of that had been when I had tried to bring that along as well. I think we need to take a look at what those guidelines are so that we actually do accomplish preservation issues and not simply providing money for projects. With the vacancy rates, I think that is something too that the community should take note of, that the number of vacancies that we have in the commercial district are actually lower than what they were prior to the bypass having opened. Certainly there was an awful lot of concern about what that was going to do to the commercial district. The Hoover Dam Gateway project was moving forward, which would have created an entirely new commercial district, and in my opinion would have caused great damage to our existing businesses. Again, we see that without the creation of the Hoover Dam Gateway project, without expansive and leapfrog growth, the business community has been doing okay, even under the burden of the pandemic. I think that's great. We do know that there are some businesses who have failed during the pandemic, and that's very unfortunate. In their place, we've seen new businesses come in and apparently are doing well. I think that getting some sales tax data before and during the pandemic might be helpful also for us to get a better understanding of where the business community is. And other than that, nice job.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Move to item number 11. Possible action, approval of reimbursement of Mr. Tedder's expenses to date. Mr. Tedder.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. As the mayor said, this is for a portion of my moving and relocation expenses. So far, I've spent $3,476.83 as of the time of writing this report. In the agreement, the city manager's employment agreement, there was reimbursement of up to $15,000 in moving expenses. I greatly anticipate that the total number will be well below that, as I had no temporary housing expenses. Late this afternoon, Finance let me know that this would have to be processed as a payroll check, which means that the actual net amount of the check would be less than what I've spent. So I provided a memo up there for you, and I'm respectfully requesting that the net amount of the check equal what I've spent. If you have any questions, I am here to answer them.
Thank you. And, you know, someone who worked on the negotiations with you about this, that was always the intent, my intent, and I believe the approval of that agreement was that you would be made whole on your moving expenses. We'd increased the amount to do just that, and I think the expenses, certainly you are being very conscientious in keeping those expenses as reasonable as possible. After having reviewed the memo, I have no questions about what you're requesting there. Any other questions or comments? I will make a motion then that we approve the amount that you have requested, which in your memo is $3,865.60. Is that correct?
Yes.
Anyone wishing to second that motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you, Mr. Tedder.
Thank you.
Item 12 is our final public comment period. Anyone wishing to comment during this period of time may do so on any issue. Again, each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, and we always ask people to be civil and concise. Anyone in chambers who would like to speak in our final public comment, please come forward and state your name. Yes, it is a thin crowd tonight. So.
I did not plan on speaking, so I don't have anything planned, but I first would like to say thank you to the mayor. I don't know if you recognize my name from my emails.
If you would state your name, though. I would.
Mary Crocco.
Thank you.
You had answered some questions for me promptly, which was amazing, I thought. So thank you for that. I just moved here 4 months ago, and I live right around the corner on Wyoming. And what is the speed limit?
25 is
Yeah.
what it's supposed to be.
I sit on my porch reading my book and it's like not. And I see lots of kids on scooters and bikes, and it's just, the dips don't help because they're trucks and they just, so I just thought I'd mention it. I didn't plan on it, I didn't, write anything out, but speeding on Wyoming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I've been passed by somebody on a skateboard, so. All right, anyone else in chambers? If not, we will go to the call-in. The phone number to call in is 702-589-9629. This is the final public comment period for the city council meeting. Anyone wishing to call in, the number 702-589-9629. Madam City Clerk, were there any comments provided via email?
No comments.
Thank you. All right, hearing no one else, then we will close the final public comment period. Move to our last item, council reports. Councilmember Bridges.
Thank you. Two. The first is my regular report that emergency aid does have funds to assist residents with rent and utility assistance in the event of an emergency. We also have a very well-stocked food pantry. It's best to call for an appointment since they're meeting, well, they have been meeting with clients at the window. The second is a personal experience that just happened. Coyotes can climb 6-foot walls. Be careful. Fortunately, our little dog survived, but ended up with a pretty serious coyote bite on the back of his neck. He was safely in our side yard with our two other dogs. I didn't even see it. It jumped over the 6-foot gate, and I think the other two dogs scared it off. So we no longer use our doggy door, and just be careful because they are capable of climbing those 6-foot cinder block walls. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jorgensen?
Yes, thank you. I had the opportunity this week to go to the Boulder City Museum board meeting that I serve on. I got to listen to their annual report. I was excited to hear about the number of tourist bus coming into town to be able to see the historic section of our town, to look at the museum there. If you haven't had a chance in your local or you have friends or family who are visiting, it's really a great little resource to give you an idea of how Boulder City became Boulder City. So with that being said, I think that there's also a little link on there where you can do a Boulder historic walk, and it kind of takes you around the city after that. So things are looking a little bit better and looking up, and people are back to coming to see what made Boulder City, Boulder City.
Thank you. Councilmember Fox? Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. About 2 weeks ago, I participated in a pilot program. It was sort of a pop-up produce market, sort of a farmer's market at the at the Bonneville Transit Center. It was a participation of it was kind of a partnership, I guess I should say, with Southern Nevada Health District and the RTC. It was kind of nice getting to see sort of, what the Southern Nevada Health District is doing with regards to trying to encourage healthy eating and stuff like that. And also I got a little bit of a tour of the transit area, learned a little bit more about the RTC as well. It was a really successful program. They ran it for about 2 weeks, or there was 2 days, I should say, but over the course of those 2 weeks, very successful. So they're going to hopefully see if it's something that they can't continue on with to provide decent food. It can be hard to find fresh produce and stuff in that downtown area. Also, I'd like to also announce that on the evening of Friday, October 8th, I officially became an uncle. So very, very proud of that moment. So other than that, I've got nothing else to report.
Thank you, and congratulations. Thank you. I was at the pancake breakfast last Saturday for the fire department. Appreciate all the work that the firefighters and the volunteers do to put that on. Certainly saw a lot of huge smiles on the faces of many of the children as they got to climb into the trucks and see all the equipment that's used and the helicopter that came in. Again, great to see these type of events coming back with the lessening of the pandemic. And we are seeing real progress with the pandemic. Unfortunately, the numbers are still up. I think countrywide, we're still losing 1,200 people a day. We've lost over 720,000 Americans to this disease. Vaccines are out there. They're safe, they're effective, they're free, they're readily available. I went last week for my annual flu shot. The woman who was giving me the shot had mentioned that some folks are thinking that, well, I had the COVID vaccine, so I don't need the flu shot. She made that clear to me that, nope, you need both. So again, flu shots for a lot of folks are at no cost. Please do that. We're heading back into the colder months of the year. What we've seen over time with this pandemic is when we start getting folks in close proximity to one another, we start seeing the infection rate go back up again. So again, please talk to your healthcare provider, get the best healthcare that you possibly can. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.